Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on this Friday morning. Today on the show, we're going to take a look at what the Hawks did in the draft last night. Shockingly, the media gets it wrong again. And this is the series we've been all waiting for with the Atlanta Braves. It's all next. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
We welcome you into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta on this Friday post-NBA draft. We ask you to head over to youtube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your browser. When you find our page, subscribe and leave us a comment there. Of course, we're free and available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, Odyssey. You can always find us and download us for free. And, of course, leave us a 5-star review. And follow me on my personal Twitter page. That would be at JMCH316. Well, as I said, we have the NBA draft wrapped up. So, last night, the Hawks, look, I know everybody was expecting, and we're going to talk about this coming up the next segment. Oh, John Collins going to be traded. Okay. How'd that work out? So I said on the show that I always expected them to pick 16th, and I didn't expect them to trade John Collins last night. I didn't think any of those things were going to happen, but again, we'll talk about that coming up in the next segment. So what did the Hawks do last night? Well, with the 16th pick, they stayed and they picked A.J. Griffin, a guy who maybe fell a little bit. I know he said at the press conference last night he expected to be drafted a little bit higher. What's interesting about this pick more than anything is this is a guy the Hawks did not work out. Now, they did interview and they'd have talked with him, but this is a guy that they did not bring in to work out. And when you consider how many prospects, honestly, that they brought in for workouts, and it's not completely unique. Let's understand that the number one pick in the draft, Paolo, he didn't work out for the Orlando Magic. And it was a little bit of a surprise when he was taken. So it's not unheard of to draft a guy that you didn't bring in for a workout. Maybe they thought he wasn't going to fall that far. I don't know what the situation is, but you would think that he'd have been a guy that they worked out. Do I read the tea leaves into this? I'm going to say it like this, based upon a few things I've heard and talking to some people and this and the other. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a pick that they don't move in a future trade. Now, as far as Griffin goes, how does he profile? He's an excellent shooter. That's his big thing, is that he is a terrific perimeter shooter. He can, he's a catch and release 3-point shooter. I think he was one of the top guys in college basketball last year, in the high 40s from the 3-point line. No doubt about it. He's an offensive-minded player first. Defensively, he doesn't profile the way that you would like. He's got some issues, maybe not as quick with his first step defensively. He's not really good getting around screens and things like that. So I'm not saying he's a complete one-dimensional player, but certainly his strong suit is to catch and jump and shoot and score, and that's really what his role was, at Duke. I mean, he was not their lockdown defender by any sort of the stretch of imagination. So that's fine. He's a really good shooter. He's one that can consider one of the better shooters that was in the draft. But when you think about the idea of they didn't work him out and, you wondered about whether or not they would stay at 16, I'm not going to be surprised at all if the Hawks don't move on from this pick. I'm not going to be surprised if he's not a part of a package in a later trade, in a future trade. So whatever that is doesn't really matter. But when your skill set is you can shoot the basketball and you're a good perimeter, shooter, okay, that is a valuable trait that there are a lot of teams that are going to work on. And look, he comes from an NBA background, right? His dad has been an NBA coach. He's been an assistant with Toronto for several years and things like that. So, he does have that high basketball IQ. He's got that pedigree that you would like in an NBA player. I just get the sense, though, that he's a guy that they will probably move on from. Now, if he does stay, I think there's a real good chance that he would be on this roster. And I know everybody's going to say, well, Nate doesn't play rookies. I get that. They got 2 rookies from last year that barely got on the court. But I don't think that I think because of his skill set, and especially, let's say they keep him, but they move on from Bogey or Gallinari and things like that. And he is a long wing. So, I mean, he's got the 7-foot wingspan, right? He's got the good height and everything like that. So he's got those measurables. if they move on from a Bogey or Gallinari, I think he stays up here. I don't think he goes down to the G League. I don't think he ends up in College Park and plays for that team down there and spends his season, down there like Johnson and Cooper did last year for the Hawks. I think he's got a shot to make the roster, and he could actually maybe provide them a little bit of bench scoring. I mean, that's one of the things that if they decide to move on from a Gallo, Bogey, what have you, you're going to have to improve that scoring off the bench, because it's not been one of the things that the Hawks have been really good at over the last few years. You expect Lou Williams to probably move on, even though he wants to play in the league. He's going to probably move on from the Atlanta Hawks. So you're going to need somebody who can come off the bench and at least give you some offense. I think AJ Griffin could be that guy. But again, I think that he's going to be part of a package that they move on from. Now, the other pick that they made was at 51. That was and they traded, I should say. I mean, let me clear that part of it up. They had the 44th pick. They traded it and a couple million. They got a couple $1 million in cash back. And at 51, they took Golden State's pick, which was Tyrese Martin. He's an interesting prospect. I mean, he's out of UConn, comes from a great program, right? I mean, comes from, top tier program in college basketball. Not a bad scorer, but he is a pretty good defender, and he's a pretty good rebounder. Let's be honest, he'll be down in the G League. So, again, I don't expect him to be up with this club right now. He's a guy that's got some work ahead of him and things like that, but he does a couple of things well that the Hawks, I think, would like to see, and that's he can play some defense and he can rebound the basketball. So he can work on his scoring and everything like that when he's down in the G League or, what have you. He's another kid that's got the nice size and everything to him, 6'6", right? So he fits the profile, right? It seems like everybody in the NBA draft nowadays is somewhere 6'4" to 6'8", and they'll got the big long wingspan, and you're trying to find all those wings and things like that. So am I mad that the Hawks didn't trade out of the number 16 pick? Not hardly, when I told you that was what was going to happen from the very start of all of this. It didn't feel like that there was going to be any deal that was going to just blow the socks off the Hawks and make them want to move. And, we heard that they're getting out of the Rudy Gobert discussion. Awesome. I'm all for being out of the DeAndre Ayton discussion. Our front court was not our problem last year. It wasn't that we had incompetent rim protection or center play last year. So before I start paying more than twice as much money for that position, I'd rather focus on the other things that I need to get fixed. Does AJ Griffin fix anything? Does Tyrese Martin fix anything? I don't know. I mean, if Griffin can learn to play some defense, maybe he can help and things like that. But if you're a really good shooter and teams are looking for a prospect, or they're looking for something that's a good attribute in a trade package, then being a really good three-point shooter would be that, right? Like being one of the best shooters in college basketball, or maybe the guy who is considered the best shooter coming into this draft. Maybe that's something that is attractive and valuable to other teams out there. I was kind of hoping that Jalen Williams would fall to the Hawks. He's another guy that has got good length and the big wingspan, and, can play both sides of the basketball and is a pretty good defender. But, they went with a guy that they thought fell into their lap, and a guy that they feel like if he stays, he can help. But based upon some of the things that I'm hearing is that this may be using him in a trade package later on. So I think the draft was fine. I didn't have a lot of expectation. I've said if they could find a role player and a guy that helped them contribute off the bench or what have you, I wasn't expecting a starter, wasn't expecting a star. If that all happens, then that's a bonus, right? But I was just basically looking for a guy to come in and maybe kind of help fill a role. If Griffin can score the basketball at this level like he did in college, maybe if they move on from some of their other perimeter shooters, he's a guy that can help them out. All right, when we come back, shockingly, the media got this all wrong, though. Let's take a look next at what the blue check mark media has missed out on here of late in Atlanta. It's Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.